The war had been over for months, but in the German city of Dresden, the war still lived everywhere. It lived in the broken streets where children no longer played. It lived in the walls that had collapsed but refused to fall completely, standing half alive like tired men. It lived in the air, which smelled of ash even when the fires were gone. People woke up every morning and pretended that peace had arrived, but peace had not learned how to walk through ruins yet. In one narrow street, between two buildings that no longer trusted gravity, lived a mother named Greta Turner. She was not old, but the war had pulled years out of her face. Before the war, she used to count time by seasons. Now she counted it by nights. Nights when she could not sleep. Nights when she whispered her son's name without sound. Her son's name was Jonas. Jonas had left home wearing a uniform that was too big for him and fear he tried to hide. He had promised he would return. Every soldier promised that. Some promises returned. Some did not. When the war ended, people waited at stations. They stood with bags and hope. Trains arrived full. Then empty. Jonas never stepped off any of them. No letter came. No officer came. No death notice arrived. Just silence. Silence is not empty. It is heavy. Greta carried it every day. One morning, when fog sat low on the street like it had nowhere else to go, there was a knock at Greta's door. It was not loud. It was tired. Greta did not expect anything. She opened the door slowly. A postal worker stood there. His coat was worn. His eyes avoided hers. In his hand was a single envelope, dirty, bent, its edges soft like it had been handled too many times. He did not smile. He did not explain. He just said, "This arrived today." Greta took the envelope. She knew the handwriting before she read the name. Her hands began to shake, not from cold, but from recognition. She closed the door and stood there, holding the letter like it might disappear if she moved too fast. The letter was from Jonas. Her breath became shallow. Her fingers struggled with the flap. When she finally opened it, the paper inside was thin and creased. She unfolded it slowly. The first line broke something inside her. "Mother. I'm coming home tonight." Greta read it again. Tonight. She sat down hard on the chair behind her. Her heart raced, but her mind refused to catch up. Tonight meant now. Tonight meant footsteps. Tonight meant her son. Then she looked at the date. The letter had been written 6 months earlier. The room seemed to tilt. Greta held the paper closer to the light. She read the date again. She was not wrong. The letter was old. Very old. Why was it here now? Why would Jonas write, tonight, if tonight had already passed long ago? Hope rose anyway. It always does. Hope does not ask permission. Greta stood up. If Jonas was coming, the house was not ready. The table was dusty. The chair was broken. The room smelled like survival, not welcome. She began to clean. She swept dust that returned as soon as she turned away. She wiped the table even though it would never look new again. She found a small piece of bread and placed it in the center like a celebration. She fixed the chair with string. She worked fast, like time itself was chasing her. All day, the letter stayed in her pocket. As evening fell, Greta read it again. This time, she noticed a line near the end she had missed before. "If I arrive late, Mother, please leave the door unlocked." Her stomach tightened. No one left doors unlocked anymore. But Jonas had asked. When night came, Greta placed a lantern near the door. She unlocked it. She sat down and waited. Midnight passed. 1 o'clock passed. 2 o'clock came. The city stayed silent. Then, just once, Greta thought she heard her name. She stood quickly and opened the door. No one was there. But on the floor, faint and gray, were marks that looked like ash, not dirt, as if someone had stood there briefly, and left. Greta closed the door slowly. She held the letter tighter. Somewhere deep inside, a question began to wake up. Greta did not sleep. She sat near the door with the lantern burning low, watching its small flame shake whenever the wind slipped through the broken window. Outside, Dresden felt hollow. The city did not make the sounds a city should make. No laughter. No distant music. Only the soft creak of damaged buildings and the occasional echo of a step that never came close enough to matter. Every few minutes, Greta reread the letter. The words did not change, but her understanding of them did. Tonight no longer sounded like a promise. It sounded like a question. A question she was afraid to ask out loud. She tried to remember the last time she had seen Jonas clearly. Not the day he left for war, that memory was sharp and painful, but the small, ordinary moments before it. Jonas sitting at the table, eating too fast. Jonas fixing the window even though he had no idea how. Jonas laughing at something that was not funny just to make her smile. Those memories came easily. What did not come easily was the idea of Jonas standing somewhere in the dark, close to home, unable to reach it. Greta stood up and checked the door again. Still unlocked. Still quiet. She stepped outside. The street was empty. Broken stones lay scattered like forgotten toys. She walked a few steps, then stopped. Her voice felt too small for the night, but she whispered anyway. Jonas? Nothing answered. She returned inside, ashamed of herself for hoping so loudly. That was when she noticed the marks again. The faint gray smudges near the door. She knelt and touched them. They were not dirt. They were light, almost powdery. Ash. Greta's chest tightened. Ash meant fire. Ash meant destruction. Ash did not belong on the boots of a man coming home. She wiped her fingers on her dress and stood. The lantern flickered, and for a moment the shadows on the wall looked like someone moving. Greta turned sharply. No one. She told herself she was tired. That grief played tricks on the mind. That 6 months of waiting had finally broken something. Still, she picked up the envelope again. She studied it the way one studies a map when lost. The address was correct. Her name was spelled the way Jonas always spelled it, carefully, slightly crooked. The stamp was faded, as if it had been wet. Greta noticed something else now. The envelope had been opened before. Not by her. The edge was rough. Torn, then pressed back down. Someone had read this letter. Someone had decided not to deliver it. That thought settled heavily in her stomach. Greta wrapped her shawl tightly around herself and sat again. The night stretched on, thick and slow. Every sound made her lift her head. Every silence made her heart beat faster. By the time the sky began to lighten slightly, she felt older than she had during the war. Morning came without kindness. Gray light filled the room. The lantern had burned out. The door was still unlocked. Greta had not moved. She stood slowly, her body stiff. Outside, neighbors began to stir. A man dragged a broken cart down the street. Somewhere, a woman coughed. Greta folded the letter carefully and placed it in her pocket. She knew what she had to do. She had waited long enough. She stepped outside and walked toward the railway yard. The station had once been full of noise. Now it was quiet and damaged. Trains came and went without celebration. Greta walked past the tracks to a nearby wall where families had written names. Names of sons. Names of husbands. Names of brothers. Some were crossed out. Some had notes beside them. Most had nothing. Greta searched slowly. She found it. Jonas Turner, last seen November 1945. Her knees weakened. She held on to the wall. November. The same month written on the letter. Jonas had survived the war. He had lived long enough to come home. He had tried. Greta closed her eyes. The night before replayed itself in her mind. The unlocked door. The ash. The feeling that someone had been close. Too close. She returned home quickly, her thoughts racing. She searched every corner of the apartment again, not for hope now, but for truth. Behind a cabinet, she found something she had never noticed before. A small envelope, yellowed, hidden where dust gathered. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was another letter. Shorter. Messier. Written in a rush. Mother, if you are reading this, something has gone wrong. I was close. Very close. I removed my uniform. I tried to come quietly. If anyone tells you I betrayed my country, don't believe them. I was tired. I only wanted to come home. Greta sat on the floor. Now the pieces fit together in a way she did not want them to. Jonas had returned after the war. Not as a soldier. As a son. And something had stopped him. Greta stood slowly. Her fear had changed. It was no longer fear of loss. It was fear of truth. She knew the city well enough to know where truth disappeared. And she knew that if she stayed silent, Jonas would disappear forever. She folded both letters carefully and placed them together. Then she opened the door and stepped back into the city that had already taken so much from her. Greta did not go home right away. She walked instead, slowly at first, then faster, as if the streets themselves were pulling her forward. Dresden was awake now. Not alive, awake. People moved through the ruins with practiced care, stepping where they knew the ground would not collapse. Faces passed her, tired and guarded. Everyone here had learned the same lesson after the war. Survival now depended on knowing when not to ask questions. Greta had lived in this city long enough to understand its new rules. During the war, danger came from the sky. After the war, it came from people who had learned how to stay useful. Men who had once worn uniforms now wore authority. They controlled food lines, housing permits, and, most quietly, mail. She thought of one name she had heard again and again in whispers. Herr Müller. Before the war ended, he had been a small official, barely noticed. After surrender, he had somehow become important. His house always had light. His stove always had fuel. People said he helped keep order. People also said he knew things better left unknown. Greta stopped outside a narrow building that had survived the bombing better than most. Its windows were intact. That alone felt suspicious. She did not knock softly. She struck the door hard with her fist. It opened after a moment. Müller stood there, well-fed compared to others, his face stiff with irritation. When he saw Greta, recognition flashed in his eyes, and something like caution. "What do you want?" he asked. Greta did not answer. She stepped inside. The room smelled of coal and paper. Files were stacked against the wall. A radio sat silent in the corner. On the table lay envelopes, many envelopes. Greta pulled out Jonas's letter. "Where was this?" she asked. Müller's face tightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." She placed the letter on the table. Then the second one. Müller looked at the dates. The color drained from his face. "You don't understand," he said quickly. "Those were difficult months. Things were chaotic. You kept it," Greta said. Her voice did not shake. "You kept my son's letter." Müller sighed and rubbed his forehead. "People came back changed. Angry. Dangerous. We had to protect the city." "My son was not dangerous," Greta said. Müller hesitated. That hesitation told her everything. He came back without a uniform, Muller said finally. That alone made him suspicious. Some men wanted revenge. Others wanted silence. And you? Greta asked. I wanted order, Muller replied. Greta laughed, a short, broken sound. Order without truth is just another war. Muller looked away. He was taken for questioning. That's all I know. Where? Greta asked. Muller did not answer immediately. When he did, his voice was lower. Near the rail yard. An old warehouse. People stayed there, temporarily. Temporarily. Greta turned toward the door. Don't go there, Muller said. There's nothing left. Greta stopped and looked back at him. Then why are you afraid? She left before he could answer. The warehouse stood apart from the rest of the city, its walls dark with age and smoke. The doors hung crooked on broken hinges. Greta pushed one open and stepped inside. The smell hit her first, dampness, rust, and something older. The light was dim. Her footsteps echoed too loudly. She moved slowly. In one corner, she saw a thin blanket folded on the floor. Nearby sat a chipped cup. Nothing else. No body. No grave. But on the wall, scratched deep into the concrete, were words written with desperate care. I was close, Mother. Greta reached out and touched the letters. She slid down the wall and sat there, her back against the cold stone. Her breathing came fast and uneven. Jonas had been here. Alive. Close enough to smell home. And then he had vanished. Greta stayed there for a long time. When she finally stood, she felt different. Not weaker. Clearer. She returned home with both letters in her pocket. That night, she did not unlock the door. She sat at the table and began to write. She wrote Jonas's name again and again until it felt solid. She copied the letters. She wrote down dates. She wrote down Muller's words. When morning came, Greta did not hide. She went to the wall near the station and added a new note beneath Jonas's name. Returned after the war. Stopped before home. People paused to read it. Some nodded. Some looked away. But the silence had been broken. And once silence breaks, it never fully returns. Greta did not expect the city to answer her. But cities always answer in their own way. By the afternoon, her note near the station was gone. The paper had been torn down, the wall wiped clean except for faint marks where the words had been. Someone had taken the time to erase it carefully. Not in anger. In control. Greta understood the message immediately, stop. She did not. She returned the next day with another note. This time she wrote more carefully, pressing the charcoal hard into the wall. Jonas Turner came home after the war. He never reached his door. People stopped. They read. Some whispered. Others shook their heads and walked faster. A man muttered, "Leave it alone." A woman crossed herself quietly. By evening, the note was gone again. That night, Greta heard footsteps outside her apartment. Not passing footsteps. Pausing ones. She did not open the door. She sat in the dark, listening to the sound of breathing on the other side. Eventually, the footsteps moved away. Fear arrived then, not sudden, but steady. The next morning, Greta found her door slightly scratched near the lock. A warning, not an attack. She knew what it meant. She also knew why it would not work. The fear she felt now was smaller than the fear she had lived with for 6 months. She began speaking to people instead. Quietly at first. At the water line. Near the bread distribution point. She showed the letters only when she trusted someone. She did not accuse. She asked questions. Did you see him? Do you remember that night? Who was near the rail yard? Some people denied everything. Some said nothing. But a few faces changed when she spoke Jonas's name. That was enough. One evening, a man stopped her near the station. He was thin, older than Greta, with hands that shook even when he was still. "I saw him," the man whispered. "Your son." Greta felt her heart jump. "When?" "November. Late. He was tired." He asked where he was. "Did he say anything else?" Greta asked. The man hesitated. "He asked how far it was to your street." Greta closed her eyes. "How far?" she asked again. 10 minutes, the man said. 10 minutes. That was the distance between life and disappearance. The man looked around nervously. "They took him." "Not soldiers. Men from here." "Why?" Greta asked. The man shook his head. "Because peace made people cruel in new ways." Word spread quietly after that. Not loudly. Never loudly. Names surfaced. Stories matched. Other families came forward with letters that arrived late, or not at all. Hermuller stopped leaving his house during the day. Food deliveries changed routes. Greta noticed she was being watched. One afternoon, she returned home to find her papers scattered across the floor. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was broken. But the letters were gone. All of them. Greta sat on the floor and stared at the empty space where they had been. For the first time since Jonas disappeared, she cried without holding back. Not because the letters were gone, but because someone had been afraid of them. That fear meant the truth mattered. She stood up and went out again. This time, she did not write notes. She went to the small office where post-war records were kept. She asked for missing person forms. She filled them out carefully. She wrote Jonas's name again and again. The clerk sighed. "There's no proof." Greta looked at him calmly. "Then write that too." By the end of the week, Greta was no longer alone. 3 names appeared on the wall. Then 5. Then more. Someone painted over them. Someone else rewrote them. The city was no longer silent. It was arguing. Hermuller left Dresden shortly after. Some said he fled. Others said he was taken. No one asked which was worse. Greta walked past his empty house one morning. The windows were dark. The door was unlocked. She did not enter. She had learned something important: truth does not need revenge to survive. It needs witnesses. That night, Greta lit the lantern again. This time, she placed it in the window. People passing by saw it and understood. Some nodded. Some stopped. Some stood quietly for a moment before moving on. The lantern became a signal. Not of waiting. But of remembering.